All right, guys, I'm back with a good one here, and I hope you get something out of this one here. So, recently I began studying again to and preparing to play in an over the board tournament, hopefully in the next month or so. So I've been beginning to go back to my books, learning a lot of things, looking at DVDs, just doing the whole studying thing, and just getting back into that stride of just kind of being more conscientious of my move versus just playing on strict intuition. All right. So, and then today's topic, and that's what I want to talk about, is strategies for trading pieces. And particularly, I want to talk about a bad bishop versus a good knight. Also, kind of how can you decrease your opponent's activity with an advantage, but also increase your piece activity with an exchange of an advantage. And exchange of an advantage don't always involve an exchange of a piece, but sometimes it does. So before we move on, I'll just give you a quick little the way that I think about an advantage. So the way I think about of having an advantage is let's just say you have an extra pawn on the E file, that's on the A file that's passed, and your opponent has to defend against this pawn. But however, you know that in 3 or 4 moves you're going to lose this pawn. Can you use that extra advantage for that temporary extra advantage for the moment to say remaneuver your pieces to get in a better position on the king side of the board and have much more greater effect on that side? So basically, in effect, what I'm trying to say is that you want to think of an advantage as something that either you trade it in and get a new advantage to replace it that may be better, or you use that advantage itself to go ahead and win the game. So now it could also involve exchanging pieces like what we see here on the board. Now, let's look at the position really quick. Fisher has 3 centralized pieces. 2 of those centralized pieces are on dark squares, so that means that the black's bishop can never attack them. Black's knight is, it's not on a bad square, but it's not necessarily active like white's knight. Both of black's rook for the moment are passive, and the black king is cut off by the rook on e5. Additionally, just to add a little bit more, is that take a look at the king. The king has a pass straight into the game, no matter which path he chose. The white king can enter the game rather easy. All right. So now with all of these advantages, how could you not win the game? Well, you still got to play the game out. But let's take a look at this. Now, it is white's move here, but how you think about this is if it was black's move, what would black want to do here? Well, if black is a good player, he would want to get rid of that bishop. Okay, so then he could have a knight versus a knight, which would be probably a much easier endeavor. So he desires to go rook to b5, for example. Okay, so if we let black go rook to b5, oops, I didn't mean to do that. If we let our black go our knight to b5, either we'll be forced to exchange, and if we do that, that would liberate his rooks, and then he would be attacking your pawn. Or if you say moved your bishop, say, out of the way somewhere and allowed him to have this diagonal here, then what would happen is that, well, black's bishop that was once bad is now active and participating in the game. So we don't want that. So in this game here, Fisher took on d7. And you might wonder, why would he do that? Now, again, let's keep in mind the idea of trading in one advantage for another advantage. So right now, if we go back one move again, to say one more time, white has most piece activity, or potential for the most piece activity. Black, on the other hand, would have to do a lot of maneuvering to really get some decent piece activity. All right, so now let's move forward here now. So once he takes, and let's go ahead and say, of course he can't take with the knight, because then you just go rook takes, and that's a pawn, right? So the only move that black that's reasonable here is go rook takes knight. So now what that does, it just allows white to come rook to c1. And so now we see that the piece that wasn't active, think about it. His knight was active first. He traded that in for a bad bishop. Now that made it so it cleared the c file, and now his rook is more active than it was sitting on a1. So he traded in an advantage of an active knight for an active rook, and black's pieces are still defensively placed because, for example, white cannot allow rook to say c6 because this rook would just have a devastating effect here. So he goes, I mean, rook to c6. He goes rook to d6 himself and then allows rook to c7, which is even better. Now, take a look at this right now. White has a major threat of coming rook to e7, and that would essentially end the game. I mean, I mean, there's really nothing that could be done at that point, but resigning. That would be the best move. Um, so the only reasonable move here again for black is to go knight to d7. Now take a look at this. Look how, if we look at the topics being covered, we exchange that good knight for a bad bishop, but we even further decrease because it looks like black pieces are not only further decreasing activity, they are sort of coordinated compared to white. White's pieces are coordinating well. White's bishop, although it's back on d3, it's just sitting on a perfect diagonal, and it's just slicing right down these two diagonals here. Not that diagonal. It's just slicing right down these two diagonals here. Again, white's king can just come in any kind of way it wants. There's nothing black can do about any of that. All right. So now, what does and one quick thing, let's just say, like, we can't really trade rooks here. And the last thing I want to say is that, again, because black's rook is cut off, he can't go rook to well, wait a minute. Let me back up. I forgot it's white's move. Now, if you go back and look at the squares here, it's obvious that white is going to stay on the e file for the reason that the a6 pawn is weak. He's not going to go anywhere on the fifth rank because that, I mean, you probably could if you was a computer, but it really wouldn't make any sense. So he does the human thing and goes rook to e2. And now what I want to say is that he can't go, say, rook to e8 to challenge this rook here, because then we would just have this, king takes, and then this a pawn is under fire. He can't even try to force something like this because, well, a3 covers that pawn, and this pawn here is still sort of under attack. And if white does something like this here, I mean, that's just, the king is cut off on the back rank. His pieces are super passive. White is just gonna say come straight in. It's just gonna come straight in like this. And then, I mean, essentially, or either take this path here if he decides to push the d4 with the pawn and come like it doesn't even matter. Okay. All right. So now let's remove that. So now you see, going from this position here where we had this advantage here of having three centralized pieces, an active knight, but our rook was sitting in the corner. We go to a position like this where now we traded in our knight, but we made a very active rook on our behalf, and also still left black with very, very reduced activity for his pieces. And basically, he's essentially lost at this point here. All right, so the game continues. As we said, rook to d6, rook to c7, knight to d7, rook to e2. Now, so Trojan goes g6. I mean, there's nothing really better to do in this position. If you take a look at this, all these pawns on white now. So they just get this bishop just that much more scope, just like that. That's amazing. That it gives white all the reason to keep playing. Okay. So now, as we said, king goes to infiltrating. White h5 is just move to play because, well, what else do you play here? F4. Then he goes h4, king to f3, and F5. And this is just like black's attempt to stop white from, say, infiltrating, say here and here. But it doesn't really help anything because just king to h3. And even if you give check, I mean, it's just still the same path. You're going to, or a different path. You can come in this way. You can go this way with the king. It's just so much you can do with the king. The king is incredibly active. The king, for example, if you could give that king a numerical value right now, that king is probably worth, say, 6, 5 or 6. I'm just speaking fictitiously here to say that it's so active and so dominating that that king is worth more than a rook at this point. Maybe not much as a queen, but definitely as much as a rook, probably. All right. So knight to b6, hoping to get a little activity with the knight, but then he now allows the devastating rook to e7 in hopes that, well, because he's going to hope to go knight to d5 and say snag a pawn here. Of course, he's not going to get a rook because we're just going to go rook to f7 check and king to e8, and we're just going to go rook to b7. And when he snags the pawn, white goes bishop to c4, and that's the end of the game. And basically, there's a very deep checkmate here. But let's just go over the simplest one, for example. Let's just say if knight takes pawn because, he got his knight active, and you go here to rook to, I don't know, g7. He goes rooks to f6 to stop it. And you go check. He goes, blocks it with the rook, and then you go hit him with the bishop, and he has no choice but to go this way, and then this here is mate just like that. So as you can see, those two rooks on the back rank are so powerful that it's amazing. Now, again, let's go back and take a look one last time. We went from this position here to this position here, okay? And even further than that, we ended up going from that position there to this position here. All because we traded in a good knight for that bad bishop, and that was because we increased the activity of our pieces because, well, now had a rook active versus the knight and made black's pieces activity way more decreased, way more defensive, and therefore that's just how you trade in one advantage to get another one. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I enjoyed going over this topic. I have many more examples of this, and I'm sure you can find many more examples. But again, for me, when I study for a tournament, what I'm trying to do is just put my conscious thoughts into my moves versus just, so I mean, I do that when I'm playing chess too, don't get me wrong, rapid and blitz, but you can't do it. It's a difference when you're playing over the board chess. You can't just play, a lot of intuitive moves, and you have to really have some real concrete ideas, or else, well, you're just going to likely lose the game unless your opponent just makes more mistakes than you do, and that's just it. You can't count on that. So with that said, you guys take care. I enjoyed this one. I'll see you in the next one.